Doctor? Doctor, come quickly!
I can't!
Callum?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't Edmure Tully leave a wedding?
God, I don't know. I never know. I never know these things.
The party is dead. The party is dead without him.
Anyway, welcome back to Game of Thrones Reactions. I'm your guest, Callum, and that's your host, Connor.
Day 11 of the Genesis of Androzani Advent Calendar for 2022. What a fine murder. Anyway, welcome. Hope you're all enjoying this Advent Calendar so far. Tomorrow, if everything goes to plan, we're going to have an Edar, which will be fun on day 12. Look forward to that. But regardless, currently, we're doing Game of Thrones Season 4, Episode 4, Oathkeeper. Of course, last time we had Breaker of Chains, where Jaime certainly broke Cersei's chains. Metaphorically speaking. What are your thoughts going into this episode, Callum?
Well, I'm expecting it to be better overall than the last episode, because we had that scene, which yeah, that happened. But the rest of the episode was pretty decent. I only had a couple of issues, but overall it was still very, very good. Apart from that scene. So I am, like I said, at the end of the last reaction, I'm expecting it to just be better. I'm expecting a bit more, I'm not expecting a bunch of production issues in terms of communication and editing processes. I'm expecting something a little bit better than what we got in that one scene.
Something a bit more consistent.
Yeah, but a
bit more even, bit more fitting.
Yeah, that'll be. Because
a nice collection of scenes that all feel like they're of the similar level of quality. Something like
that would be nice. See, I'm expecting it to be better. I'm expecting it to be better than the worst episode we've seen so far.
I mean, I when I was rewatching it, I felt really bad for the Hound and Arya scene because it came right after it.
Came right after it was good.
It wasn't their fault at all. It just overshadowed what they were doing.
No, because it was a really bad scene that came before it because just a whole bundle of errors that led to that being being broadcasted.
Yeah. Anyway, fingers crossed we can get back on track with this one, Oathkeeper.
Oh, please, please, please.
I mean, apart from the rape stuff, what are your thoughts going into the episode?
I'm expecting more. Well, at the moment, we've got King's Landing is in a very, very strange place with the death of Joffrey. In the north, we still got the eventual battle between the Wildlings and the Thenns, I believe they're called.
One of the Thenns and the Wildlings are together, but they're against Castle Black.
Yeah. No. I was about to say I was between them against Castle Black / the Wall.
Well, Castle Black's being Castle Black, to describe it bluntly, is being double penetrated by both sides. Basically, is what they're doing.
Yes.
A small force is going up the rear, whilst Mance Raider's army is lighting fire in the north.
Yeah. But it's funny that we mentioned that because of the dislike between the Thenns and the Wildlings. So that I'm expecting at some point in this season that to boil over. That seems the natural narrative that's going to come forth. And then obviously we got the Hound and Arya still travelling to the Twins?
To Eirich.
I think. To Eirich, that's it.
Away from the Twins.
Away from the Twins, that's it. Yeah.
Because remember what happened to the Twins?
Yeah.
I don't want to go back there.
No. Some of these names can get very confusing. There's a lot. There's a lot of geography in this show. And yeah, Danny's just taken, about to, I imagine, take over a very big city with more slaves. And free them.
Yes, of course.
'Cause that's kind of her motivation. She doesn't like slaves being
of course,
slaves.
the last time we saw her basically barge down the gates of Marine with those chains.
Yes,
Yes.
indeed.
It should be very
Yeah,
interesting.
I am, and that's pretty much everything at the moment. Yeah, I think so. Those are the big things at the moment, anyway.
All right then. Well, I suppose we should just crack right into it then.
I guess we shall.
And Cogman's back.
Ah.
He did Kiss by Fire.
Speaking of fire. Time for a massacre.
That should be written in Valerian.
Yeah, you'd think so.
It's a pretty annoying issue.
Oh god. Misa!
So he's not completely useless anymore?
Alright.
You're a rare talent. When you're fighting cripples, anyway. Do you think you did it?
Nah. Oh, he hated the little twat, sure, but who didn't?
Oh
Poison's
no.
not his style.
Sansa's not a killer. Not yet, anyway.
If I have to take one more leisurely stroll through these gardens, I'll fling myself from the cliffs. The following morning, Luther never made it down the stairs to propose to my sister because the boy couldn't bloody walk. And once he could.
Try and disarm each other.
Hey, look, it's Locke. Mr. Cut
That's
the Kingslayer's hand off.
Yeah.
Very talented.
Guess I was wrong.
Very interesting detail about not losing his hand,
Yeah.
given what he did to Jaime Lannister. Oh, yeah, the arrow's still there.
Deal with that. That's gonna bother him.
That doesn't allow me to have visitors at night.
I'm not a visitor, Your Grace. Word has it, I'm to be your bride. If we're going to be man and wife, we'll have a few secrets from her, I hope. So, Your Grace, because you know what happens when we marry.
We say our vows in front of the High Septon, and after the ceremony, there's a
When we
feast
marry,
where-
I become yours. Forever. Our little secret.
Oh, poor boy doesn't know. He has no idea.
I'll find her. For Lady Catelyn. And for you.
I almost forgot. I have one more gift.
I don't need a squire.
I won't slow you down, sir. Milady. What are you waiting for? A kiss?
That was some quality acting right there.
Oh, that whole... Yeah, that was great. That last sort of few minutes.
Hello there.
Hello.
Oh.
Carl Tanner from Gin Alley, drinking wine from the skull of Gior. Fucking Mormon.
Jesus. Gone a bit bonkers.
You look like a fucking ball sack. Ugly, look at your stupid cunt face. I could piss in any gutter and...
Hey, it's Ghost.
Ooh, that's cool. Shit.
Can you remember where the cage was?
The east side of the keep.
If I'm not back soon, we'll meet at...
Hold
on! Fucking disgrace, come here! Hold on!
If I was your size, I'd be king of the fucking world.
That's not very nice.
No.
It's Jon Snow's brother.
It's been rough right here.
And I thought this was gonna be another boring day.
Certainly poor timing.
Well, we haven't seen these fuckers in a while. So, Callum, your initial thoughts on Oathkeeper?
Think back to a pretty good standard there. Very much improved, especially on the parts that weren't so good last episode. But yeah, I would say overall very bloody good, very good, good standard Game of Thrones.
I have a few issues with a couple of the scenes at the start, which we'll get into. But I think after that, it gets really good. Especially in the second half. It's pretty interesting.
Second half was very strong.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, this was... I mean, Brian Cogman's known for his dialogue episodes, and this was definitely very heavy on that stuff.
Absolutely.
Where this episode stands out the most to me is the stuff with Marjorie Tyrell, the stuff with Jaime and Brienne, and then everything in the north and like sort of at Castle Black and Beyond the Wall. That was the strongest stuff. But I'll start off with... We'll start off with Meereen first, because that was at the very beginning. I guess the main focus of the episode came around Grey Worm and Missandei, but mainly Grey Worm and the Unsullied. They infiltrated the city through the sewage pipes. And gave weapons to all the slaves and to kill the masters. I have very mixed feelings on this, because on one hand, I really like how they did a focus on the side characters here with Grey Worm. Like, Missandei was teaching him, English and all that, but specifically, this is the first time we've gotten a proper, deep, character focus on Grey Worm himself, which I thought was really good, and I thought Jacob Anderson played it really well, especially in the scenes where he was speaking Valyrian to the slaves. I think the whole thing of the Unsullied and the slaves having a connection works, but there's a couple of details in this storyline that are a bit wrinkly. Firstly, let's not forget how absolutely massive Meereen is, and how much time it would take to get weapons to all of these slaves.
Yeah, I doubt very much that one tomb is where all the slaves are.
Yeah,
Considering they mentioned that
this is,
for each master there is 3 slaves.
Yeah, so they severely downscaled the how big of a deal it would be to overthrow the slave masters, which in terms of world building, it kind of shrinks the stakes quite a bit. It makes Marine seem a lot smaller than it actually is, and it dials down the complexity. The other issue I have, it's not major, but the fact that Kill the Masters is written in the common tongue and not in Valyrian is really stupid, because the slaves don't know the common tongue.
The only thing you could probably say as best faith is someone like Grey Worm wrote it, but even then, I don't.
Even then, he's learning the common tongue. He's learning to speak it.
Exactly. I don't believe he would write it in a.
And as we know from someone like Davos Seaworth, speaking the common tongue and actually being able to read it and write it are 2 completely different things, especially for a lowborn. So that should have said Kill the Masters in Valyrian, not in the common tongue. I think the only reason why they had it in that is so that the English audience watching the show could understand what it said.
Yeah, clearly.
But I would have preferred if it was just consistent with, with what the characters would do. And then there's one other thing that I guess we did get Barristan advising against it. But the act of Daenerys acting out revenge on the slave masters. So was it 160 slaves that were pinned up to those posts, right? So the idea was that she wanted to pin up the exact same number of slave masters to the post as well, as an act of revenge. I will fight injustice with justice. It's nice to have a minimum there with Barristan's point of view, but I think this misses the whole dimension of Daenerys' complexity, morally speaking, and this is something that's been an issue for quite a while. I said this when she stole the Unsullied from Krasnus at Astapor, and I think there was some bits in Karth as well, is that they aren't doing enough to get across how big of a deal this is morally for her. It's all it's too simple. All these things should be shrouded in complexity, morally speaking and politically speaking, because there's not only is it a huge city with lots of people, lots of slave masters, 1 slave master per 3 slaves, and also the whole thing of her pinning up those slave masters as an act of revenge. This is something that should be seen as pretty drastic, and I think only having Barristan advise against it as mercy is not enough. And I think they are building up Daenerys too much as a girl boss and not enough as a struggling person who's out of her depth. She
freed the slaves. She freed all the slaves.
They're not portraying Daenerys as being out of her depth, which is what she's supposed to be. She's supposed to be out of her depth and going, the whole point of her character in the books, especially because she's 13 years old in the books, is that she's oversimplifying her solutions to these very complicated issues. But they're not portraying it that way. They're portraying it as being quite heroic, apart from that one detail of Barristan saying maybe you should give them mercy. But I don't think it's enough. I think they are progressively getting lazier in executing these very, very, very complicated beats for her character and the characters around her. And I think that's not enough for Game of Thrones. I think they can do better. But that's my take on it. Not a bad storyline, just one that could be improved.
Well, with the whole, especially when she's walking up the stairs, and you have all the slaves just chanting Misa, Misa.
And standing at the top of the pyramid as well. Zooming out with the epic Targaryen flag over the harpy and everything. It's very sort of lots of fanfare for her conquering, and no, no, that's not the point of Daenerys.
Very, very much pushing a narrative.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it's not. We haven't got to the point of it breaking her character or anything, but this is definitely lesser than what it should be. It's definitely shrinking it down to size.
But when you compare it to everything else in the show, this is very complex in terms of how it's being presented. When one of this show's strength is showing the complexity of people's decisions and morality, this very much just seems like she is a good person through and through, and the way the story is presenting it is that this is a good thing.
Yeah, I think the only having Barristan make one regard comment against it is not enough, and I think that's lazy. I think you could do way more.
Yeah, you don't even like
more.
have you don't even have anybody else who you'd think would say. So, yeah, it's to have one line, and that's pretty much it.
Like, I would have thought that Jorah would have had something to say about this. Jorah Mormont?
Yeah, Jorah Mormont. Yeah, I would have assumed Mormont would say, or at the very least, be involved in the conversation.
Yeah.
That feels very unlike him to not be a part of this kind of conversation, because 100%. The character is always in the good parts of like Dany's story, when there is that complexity of like, especially in like, I guess like season 1, he was always in conversation. Even in Karth, that was something that was a part of that story, but it wasn't to the same level. But it was still something they tried to achieve. With Jorah so far, it very much kind of seems like he is just kind of there so far this season.
Well, especially because when you look at
like now thinking about,
like, if you remember season 1, how involved he was in everything. He was so, and he had a say on everything. He was getting involved in every little beat, like with Viserys and with Khal Drogo and with the
every decision that
witchcraft and everything
Daenerys made. Yeah, well, every decision that Dany made, Jorah Mormont was there to either be devil's advocate or to explain what will probably happen if she makes this choice.
And you remember
so far, I don't really feel his presence at all.
When Mary Mazdor was in the tent with her, Jorah Mormont guarded her from the Dothraki who wanted to kill her. That was a great scene. So this is way too rushed, and it's way too small size for Meereen. Meereen in the books is like more the politics in A Storm of Swords and A Dance of Dragons with Slaver's Bay, especially Meereen, is like more complex than the entire of Westeros. Like it's such a big city with so many things going on, and the whole point of it is supposed to be that this young upstart Targaryen girl is way out of her depth and cannot handle it, and her making these drastic decisions like pinning the slave masters out of revenge is supposed to show that she doesn't know what the fuck she's doing, but the TV show doesn't show her in that light, partly because they've aged her up and partly because they portray her as being, you know, obviously she makes very big decisions and is very confident in herself, but there's not enough complexity to this for it to be what it's supposed to be, really. Like this whole thing of Grey Worm and the Unsullied getting all the slaves together to rally around and overthrow the slave masters, that's like half a season's worth of material, and they did it in one episode.
They did it in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, wah. And that's a shame. So that I wasn't a fan. I wasn't a big fan of that. But again, at the same time, some really good performances. Especially, I thought Jacob Anderson really brought it with his material in this. I think the cinematography was pretty good. It's, you know, but it just could be better. This could have just been done better, storytelling wise. It's a bit like what I said about Yunkai in season 3. The second son storyline is so rushed and just happens all in one episode. You know.
Well, he just sort of he murders them in a conversation, and that's it.
Yeah, and like their characters are so paper thin. It's like there's that one guy.
The one character who was just an arsehole and wanted to
there was
people.
Yeah, there was one guy who was a massive arsehole pervert, and the other guy was just nothing.
He was just calm, collected man.
Yeah, and Dario Naharis is the only one that was interesting.
Was character. He was the only one with character. And funnily enough, he's the one that actually continues on in the show.
Yeah. And again, like...
He wasn't even in this, by the way. He wasn't even in this.
Yeah,
which is a bit surprising.
you could have had a whole conversation of Barristan being like, you must treat them with mercy, and then Jorah being like, perhaps it's too soon, Khaleesi, and then you could have Dario Naharis saying, actually, I think it's a great idea. I think we should, pin them all up. Let them die. Like, having that whole dynamic of them all bouncing off each other, being like, hold on, what the fuck's going on? Tension.
The complexity of morality, yeah. What's been kind of a thing in the show. Yeah.
Yeah, and like, Daenerys having to witness all these men around her trying to determine what she should and should not do, and then, something like her snapping in her immaturity saying that this is what I've decided.
I think I'm just looking back at the episode, like he was the one time you see him is when he's at the top of the stairs, and that's it. We don't really get in the conversation with him, and he doesn't not really part of the conversation. And same with Jor. He's there, but he doesn't say anything other than pointing out that there was 163 slaves pinned.
Yeah. So I thought that was probably the weakest thing about this episode was the very start in Marine. I thought that was rushed. Which is a shame.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was one other scene that has some issues in it that I can't fully explain yet. I can sort of explain half of it. It's the scene with Tyrion and Jaime in the prison cell, which there's some really good material in there. But the one thing that is an issue is the question of whether or not Jaime would fight for him. Like he was called to do in the Eirich in season 1. So there's a little, I don't know if you call it a plot hole or a character hole inconsistency, but Tyrion is smart enough to know that if Jaime fought for him, that Tywin would call it off. And they just don't address that. And that's an annoying little detail that they just didn't do. It makes Tyrion seem less smart than he actually is for him not to think of that option. Because even though Jaime's hand is gone and can't actually win a fight, Tywin wouldn't let Jaime die in a fight. So that is a small problem. And the books get around this, and I'll explain why in another review much later what I mean by that. So yeah, that was the one other wrinkle I had with this episode, I think, from memory. But yeah, what was your thoughts on that Tyrion scene? In the cell?
I enjoyed their conversation because the Jaime and Tyrion has always been very much like, even the scene later with Cersei, the fact that Jaime's always pitied Tyrion. I think I really enjoyed their back and forth and their conversation of them just talking.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing that. See, because this is why the sex scene in the Sept of Baelor, it just fucks everything up, because the power dynamic in this is that Cersei is in control of Jaime. And because of the way that sex scene was executed in episode 3, it's very strange going from that to this, because you'd think watching this episode that she actually has power over him. Weirdly, in the last episode, even though they didn't intend it.
Literally, that scene has not been addressed at all.
No, because because they didn't. Yeah, exactly, because they didn't intend it to be rape the way it was.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what's happened. That's how it's presented.
So it's tailed off into something else, and now they're writing a story based on the idea that it wasn't what was presented. It's very weird.
Yeah, which is illogical with how we see it.
Yeah, I know, it's fucking annoying, but what are you gonna do about that now? Anyway, so I guess in a way they got their characters back on track to where they were before that scene.
Yeah, Jaime. Jaime in this episode, it feels like they, even though they didn't know, because obviously they wouldn't have known the time of filming how fucked up the production for the whole scene would have been. Yeah. But it almost feels like they did their best to redeem him in a sense with all these
unintentionally
scenes. Some really good material. Like the scene between him and Bronn is pretty darn good. I really like that scene a lot with Jaime. I really like their scenes with Brienne.
Because this was like
those scenes were probably my favorite.
This was back to like end of season 3 Jaime again, you know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This was the same as him explaining what actually happened with the Mad King. Yeah, that level of sort of like dialogue and acting were pretty much
so
on par
I
with that
really liked how we had, you know,
episode.
Cersei is drunk, obviously, because Joffrey's just died. She's gone mad. She is very not happy with Jaime, even at the very end of the scene, saying that is all Kingsguard or something like that, not even referring to him personally, just acting as if he's a stranger, which is really quite heartbreaking for him. And of course, pairing that off with the scene with Jaime and Brienne, the dynamics have flipped. And you can see Jaime is starting to grow tired of Cersei. In a sense, like he feels betrayed by her now, because he spent all that time getting back to her, and now she's not giving him.
Oh yeah, he spent over a year, like you said, covering it in his own shit for a long ass time, just so he could get back. And this is what
and lost his hand, and she's not reciprocating that love, and then of course you have the dynamic between him and Brienne, which developed naturally over the course of that journey. And now this is probably my favorite scene in the episode, very fitting given it's the title of the episode, is when he gives Brienne Oathkeeper and the suit of armor. I thought that was lovely. How he realizes that his sword fighting hand is gone. He has no need for a Valyrian steel sword, so he might as well give it to someone that can use it well. And he trusts Brienne, and obviously he swore an oath to Catelyn, and so did she. So I really like that it says you protect Sansa Stark with this sword that I'm giving you. I really like that bit where she says, I'll do it for Catelyn and for you.
Yeah, that was really good stuff.
And there was some brilliant facial acting from both of them in that whole thing. Of course,
yeah.
Brienne's been given Podrick as a squire as well.
Oh, that was funny.
Yeah.
That was really funny. His sort of facial expression in that scene was so funny.
Bloody Bronn gave him Tyrion's axe from the Blackwater. He's like, what, you waiting for a kiss? Go ready your horse. But yeah, I love that whole farewell between Jaime and Brienne. Yeah, let's hope they don't fuck it up the next time they meet each other.
Hopefully.
Dave and Dan? Because this is a really, really, really good relationship they've built up between Jaime and Brienne.
Yeah, these last of like
since near the end of season 2.
Yeah, end of season 2 to now has been a really good trajectory for these two characters in terms of their friendship together and the sort of how they've grown and how they've it's all been really bloody good to culminate in this scene with their last conversation, naming her sword Oathkeeper, which is fucking a really good fucking thing narratively. It's this is probably the best scene in the episode, I'd say.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And then, of course, we get my other favorite bit of the King's Landing storyline, which was with the Tyrell ladies. Of course, there was some great bits of visual storytelling in this episode that was panning between different scenes. So you'd see one scene that would talk about something that would pop up in the next scene, and then that would follow, and there's like a little linking chain. I really liked that a lot. Given that Joffrey has just died, there's a lot of questions going around about who was behind this murder. Obviously, some people think it's Tyrion.
Who did it?
Some people think it's Tyrion, some people think it's Sansa. But I really liked the detail of, and we'll get to the Littlefinger Sansa scene later, how he spoke about the necklace that Dantas Hollard gave her. And then you see when Olenna Tyrell speaks to her daughter Marjorie, she adjusts the necklace around her neck and says, "Don't you worry about it, dear." That was a great bit of visual storytelling that they did there. I loved the whole thing of her basically telling her that story about how she ended up marrying her granddad. Her granddad was betrothed to her sister, and then she basically stole him from her.
Yeah.
I was good. I was good. I was very good. And you are even better. I love their dynamic. The Olenna and Marjorie Tyrell. They're two of my favorite like little side characters, you know, because they're just as devious as like Varys and Littlefinger and Cersei, but they have a different kind of motivation to all this. Like, it's hard to explain. Like they are devious in what they do, but they have quite good intentions. But there is also that needing to get their family on the throne motivation as well.
Yeah.
But I love that. And then, of course, we had the scene with... Actually, no, I'll let you talk about this first if you want
to. Which scene? The...
Olenna Marjorie.
Yeah, oh yeah, I really like that scene. Yeah, like you said with the transition to that scene, I noticed that it's like... That's what I think a lot of these episodes do really well with, when they transition from two dialogue-heavy scenes, from one to the other. The transition between them is very well done, and very, very ease into it. But yeah, I really enjoyed this scene. Both funny, but also very like, yeah, more trinkles of like what their true intentions are, but stuff you could always pick up on in every scene they're in. Yeah, so well performed. Just every line is so well delivered, and like the dialogue for them is so good. Yeah, I really enjoyed that scene a lot. Marjorie is like a character that she's very much, like you said, a side character at the moment, but she's so well defined.
Yeah,
especially with the scene we get later with Knight. That scene, scene was like, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a quiet show stealer with that scene with Tommen and Marjorie. That was hilarious. I loved that scene.
That was very funny. Oh, it's so well done. It's so like just the cuts between their facial expressions, just displaying like how like unaware.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
He's a decent little actor. Dean Charles Chapman is. He's
good. He's pretty good.
He's like when they give him like these little lines, and he does everything with his facial expressions, and he's got a very good expressive face, especially playing like the innocent, naive boy that has no idea he's been manipulated, and just is excited by the idea of this very attractive queen that he's about to marry, and she's like, our little secret. And like this is a kind of manipulation that someone like Littlefinger, or for example, could never do. Like Littlefinger could never do what Marjorie does with Tommen, because Marjorie has something that he doesn't. You know, she has the benefit of being born into this very rich family, and has the benefit of being this very sort of beautiful-looking, charismatic, charming, young, desirable princess sort of thing. But also has been taught to be quite manipulative and wicked from her grandmother. Yeah, I thought that Marjorie was so good in that scene with Tommen. Like, she was just... every facial expression, every line was just perfect.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And
very well dialogued. And it
kind of reminded me of the scenes she had with Renly Baratheon, actually.
A little bit, yeah. But
even more...
She knows how to... She's very good at adapting to the person she's talking to.
Yeah.
So that she is very much in control in a lot of ways.
Yeah, except the difference is that with Renly Baratheon, he was a gay king and she was trying to help him through that process of having to participate in traditional activities, let's just say, and that was a struggle for him. Whereas with Tommen, it's more like she's trying to seduce a boy, which is morally it's quite fucked up when you think about it, because he's definitely underage by far. But medieval Game of Thrones. Known for its nonsense. But of course it's all part of the game for her. She accepts that this is the reality.
Very well.
And of course, you know, she knows that she can manipulate him easier than she could do Joffrey, because she couldn't control Joffrey. She tried and she did well, but she wasn't able to get
she
full
did about
grip over
the
him.
best she probably could, where she was not in danger at any point, really.
Yeah, she did pretty damn well considering.
She got. Yeah.
But she'll absolutely steamroll over Tommen, because he's absolutely just infatuated with her. There's that bit was just like, do you know what that means? That means I'm yours forever. And you can just see you can see the pupils of his eyes dilating.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Of course, he has a little cat called Sir Pounce as well, which is pretty funny. They told that story about how Joffrey wanted to cut him up and feed him Sir Pounce so he wouldn't know it was his cat that he was eating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, posthumous character development,
lovely.
right?
How lovely.
Love a bit of posthumous character development. But yeah, I thought that was brilliant. And then, of course, we had the scene with Sansa Stark and Littlefinger, which I also thought was really good scene too. She's starting to get smarter and ask the right questions.
Littlefinger's so bloody good. So deviously charismatic in every scene he's in.
I love the way that
Sansa has learned too.
I love the way that Littlefinger laid out his character sort of drive as like, there's lots of men that take no risks, they spend their time avoiding danger, and then they die. Then he says, but I want everything. Puts his hand on his shoulder. That was so good. And it's like establishing, like, she's like, well, why would you risk that all when they would have your head on a spike? And he's saying, it's because it's worth taking that risk because I want it all. And of course he says, I'm going to be marrying your Aunt Lysa Arryn at the Eyrie, which is something that he said in season 1. It's been set up and paid off.
It's in a long game plan.
And if you remember, Lysa Arryn is Catelyn Stark's sister. Oh dear.
Yep, I remember.
Yep. And of course, Littlefinger had a very long-standing love for Catelyn Stark, which was buried dead in the ground when he returned Ned's bones to her, and she was very not happy with Littlefinger.
No, I remember.
Of course, it's seemingly by his body language, he seems to have moved on to Catelyn's daughter. Let's just say that.
Very much so.
But yeah, I thought this is just, it's great to have Littlefinger back. I love that thing of like,
yes, absolutely.
Always do things that people don't expect so that they don't think it'll be you that did it. That was fantastic. I love it when Littlefinger's character motivations make sense. Let's hope
it's really well. Yeah, so far he's been pretty bloody good for the whole run.
Let's hope it stays that way. Let's hope it stays that way. Let's hope it stays that way.
Yes. Let's hope.
I'm speaking like a doomsayer here. The end is nigh.
Yeah, I like that scene a lot. Really enjoy. Yeah, and like we said, like Sansa has clearly grown smarter. She's adapted to. Like the only pro really of being in King's Landing is like there's stuff even Sansa can pick up on and how people operate and how it all works.
Well, she's learned from she's learned from Shay. She's learned from Cersei. She's learned from Tyrion. She's learned a little bit from Varys, and most of all, she's learned from Littlefinger as well.
Oh yes.
And she's smartening up.
She's finally not a great way to get a certain type of education, but oh well. You take what you can get.
Interesting little detail though.
In the world of Westeros.
Interesting little detail though, saying that they're going to the Eyrie. Who else is going to the Eyrie? What did we learn last episode? Arya and the Hound. How interesting.
How interesting.
Yes. So yeah, it's very good stuff. So yeah, that was everything in Essos and King's Landing. And now we move to Castle Black, where we have...
North of the Wall.
Well, we won't go north of the wall yet, but we'll talk mainly about the Castle Black stuff. I think
Going north.
there's quite a few things to get into here, because they spend a lot of time in the very north in this episode. Spent a lot of time around
Well, yeah,
there.
pretty much the second half of the episode was very north plotline based.
Mm-hmm. And
There was
so...
very much half an hour was dedicated to the north.
Yeah, so I think the most interesting thing to talk about first is that Locke has turned up at the wall.
He has. Interesting little thing there.
Yes. Bolton
I
Man
wonder
Locke.
what his motivations are, because we've learned about him quite a bit the last season.
Well, the last time we saw him was with Ramsay and Roose Bolton.
He was with them, yeah.
Episode 2. So he has
wonder if
travelled
there's
north
some
up to
hidden-
Castle Black.
Yeah. Wonder what the motivation is there for him, because obviously he lied to John about why he's at the why he's going to take his vows. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. And he volunteered to help out with John, so that's going to be mighty interesting going forward.
You'd have to imagine it might have something to do with the fact that, I don't know, maybe Roose Bolton is aware that Robb Stark's brother is at Castle Black.
Yeah.
That's certainly a possibility.
I mean,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
if they're going to find him, he is beyond the wall, so if they're going to find him, that would be the only way.
Yes, it's a very interesting wrinkle and a very interesting detail in the show, especially because Locke isn't actually a character in the book, so this is actually a show edition, and this whole storyline of going to Crastus Keep is actually exclusive to the show. So this is a whole thing that I guess the showrunners have constructed, which is really interesting. Maybe not on the same level, but it's like, because like Roz again is a show only character, and she had a whole storyline with the beginning, middle, and end, and then, you know, there's been a whole bunch of other things that they've threaded through there, and Locke is one of them. Locke is a combination of two other characters that have been merged together, and they've decided to involve him in the Wall storyline, which I don't think anyone could have predicted, really.
No, I certainly wouldn't.
And it's interesting to see characters like merge and go over to different storylines. Like you have now at the Wall, you've got characters like Locke and Janos Slint, who were previously in other things. Like Janos Slint was part of the King's Landing storyline in seasons 1 and 2, and then Locke was part of Jaime's storyline in season 3. So, yeah, very interesting.
It's always nice to see characters go to different stories, especially in the like sort of geography of Game of Thrones, to see characters go different places and be a part of different things. It's always very nice to see. Really makes the world feel really rich.
I also kind of like how he didn't have like any like grand entrance or anything. He was just there in the background, and then he was just there. And then he just slowly came into the scene, and like when you're watching, you're like, oh, hang on, that's Locke. That's the bastard. That's that's the guy who cut off Jaime Lannister's hand. An interesting detail is that he told Jon Snow a story about how he had to run away from having his hand cut off. So now it makes sense why he wanted to cut off Jaime's hand, because he almost had his own hand cut, you know? Just sort of a vindication in a way. It's like cut off someone else's hand instead of losing my own. It's interesting because on one hand, he tells the story from his own point of view, which makes him sound sympathetic from Jon's point of view, but Jon doesn't know the context of what he actually did. Jon doesn't know that he killed... Jon doesn't know that he cut off Jaime's hand and had his men nearly rape Brienne of Tarth, and he doesn't know that he's from the Bolton house that betrayed Robb Stark at the Red Wedding. So that's very interesting.
Interesting indeed.
Of course, the other side of the Castle Black storyline came down to that conversation between Thorne and Slint about how soon, because he's acting hand from after, Mormont's obviously passed away, but before that he left, to go beyond the Wall, and Thorne was he was leading in his absence, You get that great scene where he's just like, "Go on then, Snow. Your traitor's busted. Mormont's not here to protect you anymore." But of course, Slint made him aware that soon at some point, Maester Aemon's going to call for a vote. And if Thorne, Thorne may struggle because Jon Snow's quite popular with his brothers.
Well, yeah, we get the scene of with all the volunteers. It really gets a sense of Jon is like really well respected because of what he's done, because he's clearly a kind person, but he always fights for his brothers seemingly. So there's very much evidence to back up that fact. And I'm really enjoying Jon's story overall. I think it's kind of one of those stories because obviously with the like we mentioned at the beginning of this season, how it feels like a new era of the show, because with the first one, the big thing was the Starks against the Lannisters and that war. And it was very much that. But with Jon throughout the show, it's always been this, not background, but this story that is always going in interesting ways and always developing Jon as a person.
Yeah, it's the same thing with both Jon and Daenerys serve as B plots to whatever's going on in Westeros, in a way.
Yeah. But this has been a lot like, it's like a slow burner story, and it's building and building, and it's a really, really good journey, and I'm really enjoying pretty much everything that's coming from North in the North storyline.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think they are handling Jon's stuff at the moment a lot better than they are Daenerys's.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, so the idea was that if Jon, goes up to Crassus Keep with a few men and gets killed, then Thorne won't have to worry about him, becoming Lord Commander and having the power to tell Thorne what to do, which would be hell for him. But, of course, quite a few men decided to go with him, including his mates, Pipgren and Edison, but then also a few other men, and most notably Locke, who's not actually sworn his vows, but said he would say his vows to go up there with Jon. Very interesting. So Jon has men, and he's going to ride, they're going to go apparently 60 miles north to Crassus Keep, quite a distance. And interestingly enough, who do we have at Crassus Keep right now? Bran, his brother.
Yes.
So we have a situation where Sansa and Arya are both going to the Eyrie, and we have a situation of Jon going to Crassus Keep where Bran is. So it's an episode that's establishing that Stark siblings are about to be in very close proximity to each other for the first time since the start of season 1.
Yeah.
For Jon and Bran, at least.
Well, it's been since like episode 2.
And for Sansa and Arya, it's since Ned died.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's very interesting for Jon's storyline. We'll have to see how that goes. We did get a small scene with Samwell Tarly as well in the library, where they mentioned that Sam saw Bran at the wall.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, nice little. Yeah, it's always nice to. Because those kind of scenes are the scenes I wanted in the first episode of the season with Jon, just sort of like talking about.
Yeah,
him again, knowing what the hell was going on in the world.
Yeah, exactly. We needed the scenes of firstly him finding out that Rob was dead, and also that Sam saw Bran at, just before.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's something that's my real only issue so far with the North was those kind of bits. Because it does just feel like missed opportunities to really, really get a sense of how Jon would feel. Because that's the only thing that's been an issue for me with Jon in the whole, pretty much his whole story is those kind of scenes of like, I wish we got more of those kind of scenes.
Yeah,
where we get to see his reaction to things that are going on that he would then naturally learn about from other people.
Yeah. Any other big issue I've had with the Wall storyline was not actually to do with John. It was the that whole scene at the end of season 2 where the White Walker looks at Sam and then just walks on.
Oh yeah, we haven't explained that yet. I hope they do soon.
Well, no, because literally that same White Walker got killed by Sam in season 3. So what
there
fuck?
you go. There you go. But surely you would have an explanation for why any White Walker would, spare a human. There surely is going to be an explanation, right?
No.
You'd think so.
No, because this is the thing, right? Is that in the source material, you don't actually see them, because the others in the books are not White Walkers. They're not like these big sort of crystally ice zombie things. They're these sort of ethereal, unknown things that you can't really see and you don't know what they look like. And they have these sort of white soldiers that are like dead humans with blue eyes. But of course, in the TV show, because of the visual medium, they wanted to make them these sort of ice zombie things, and so they had a visual of them at the end of season 2. But they decided for some reason to have them see Sam, which was really stupid.
Yeah, that was kind of dumb.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll get to the White Walkers later. We go to Crestus Keep, and we see Carl Tanner, who is very, very drunk with power, drinking wine out of Geo Mormont's skull.
Yeah.
I thought Burn Gorman had an absolute banger of a performance this one. I thought he was
he was
so
great.
good.
He's I'm very glad they casted him in season 3.
Yeah.
It makes me wish he was in the whole show, but yeah. So far, every performance he's given is fucking brilliant.
Yeah, he plays Owen in Torchwood, and he's great in that too.
Yes, he does.
Rat Jam.
Yeah.
But no, I love that, because in season 3, it's just like, Sister Crasta, you are a daughter-fucking wildling bastard.
Yeah.
And then here, he's just like, I was a fucking legend.
I was a fucking legend.
Rape them till they die. Fuck them till they die. Oh god, more rape.
Yeah.
Well,
but this makes sense because they are bad people.
This rape was in character. I love the detail of like when the mother brings the baby in and all of Craster's daughters say, "Give to the gods, give to the gods."
Yeah,
that was great because they worship the White Walkers. And then it led to a very interesting turn of events. So we had Rast offer the baby and sort of leave it there for the White Walker to get it eventually. And then he goes over to Ghost's little wooden prison, Jon Snow's direwolf, which we haven't seen in a while.
He's been caged up.
Yes.
And, he just pours all his water, I'm assuming, out as a taunt.
Yeah. It reminds me. There's a
then
scene
after
in.
He gets scared.
Yeah, there's a scene in.
The ice freezes.
There's a scene in Doctor Who in one of the cliffhangers in the Marco Polo story, where they're in the middle of the desert, and they've got low water supplies, and a guy like takes their water and sabotages them and says, "Here's water, Marco Polo," and he like pours it out of the flag. It reminded me a bit of that. But yes, old Rast did not fare well. He fell over. Like
he got a bit scared.
What's it? That line where Carl Tanner's just like, "You look like a fucking ball sack."
Ugly.
That's great.
Maybe you're the man, eh?
Yes. Of course, Bran hears the baby crying. And then walks into Summer, and in trying to find the baby, finds a ghost and ends up getting trapped. And we got that dog vision camera angle.
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought was really cool. And
pretty good stuff.
But then, of course, they go to check out Crestus Keep to and he's like, oh, it's John there. And of course, while we were in their prison there, there's Direwolf. And then, of course, they go around to the side to try and find Ghost, and Mary gets hit in the head, and they chain up Hodor and stab him in the leg, which was
very, very not fun, not nice.
Quite mean of them. And then Cortana notices that Bran is wearing some pretty nice clothing, and Jojen has one of his seizures where he foams from the mouth.
Yeah.
Which, you know, Mira's supposed to help him with because she knows how to, but she's held back. Bran, obviously concerned about Jojen's safety, reveals his name. And Bran's like, he's Jon's brother. It's also, of course, he knows Jon from the Night's Watch. So that's a nice link together.
Of course.
And then Cortana's like, and I thought it was going to be another boring day. Yeah, I thought that whole exchange was great. And the way the storylines are crossing over is really interesting.
Yeah, I really am enjoying all this kind of stuff. And they're kind of building him up as like sort of the next sort of, I guess in layman's term, like a mini boss. Because I don't imagine he's going to be a big bad for the whole rest of the show, considering the final scene of this episode. But I'm really enjoying his sort of build up as this now new drunken psychopath wanderer of the Night's Watch.
Yeah, I mean he's a better big boss villain than one of the ones that's actually supposed to be a big boss villain that comes later in the show. But we'll get to that shit. We'll get to that later.
Some point.
Oh my god, we will get to what is the worst character in Game of Thrones. Later, much later.
Yeah. I like how we're now. This season feels like the season where we're more like dropping all the like notions of, we're getting a bit closer to where it all ends. We're nearly halfway there. We're dropping all these.
We've still got a lot of great stuff in here.
Of course.
And we've still got a lot of great stuff to go, but it's getting close. Like we're really.
It's starting to leak. Very slowly, it's starting to just slowly leak, and we're just seeing little drops.
Yeah. Of course, I've talked a bit about, showrunner additions and changes throughout the reviews, and we even had a couple here, stuff like the Locke character and shrinking down the Marine plotline for seemingly no reason, other than maybe budgetary constraints or just laziness. There's all sorts of things that I've talked about changes. There's quite a few in the cast storyline. Bits like, Talisa instead of Jane Westerling. All sorts of things. All sorts of things that are different. And reordering of certain storylines and scenes and blah, 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 blah. But this episode, and we got a flash of this in episode 2 in Bran's vision from the tree, but this episode establishes something that is very concrete, that is a show addition. They establish that the White Walkers have a leader. So this character that you saw at the end of the episode that picks up the baby and turns its eyes blue is called the Night King. And he has an ice crown. As opposed to what in the books is known as the Night's King, which is a whole different idea and character altogether. That's kind of somewhat related. It's like a human Man of the Night's Watch character who had an interaction with the others and one other race of characters that we haven't got to yet, but we'll get to it eventually. But yeah, Dave and Dan have established that the White Walkers have a boss character called the Night King, and this is it. And he's this creepy zombie-looking thing with an ice crown, and he turns babies' eyes blue. I thought the whole visual of it was really cool, like the whole the White Walker taking the baby to the sort of almost this is somewhere really far north in the land of winter where the White Walkers are, and you see the rider's blood in the background, and this is basically where they are, like somewhere. We don't know where it is. It's very ambiguous. It's very sort of no man really knows where they are, but they are somewhere beyond the wall. And I loved the whole visual of it. I thought it was really creepy. But I guess, like the sort of what we've seen before with like them leaving patterns behind and all that, these are things where it just raises questions. So these are all things where you're like, well, I wonder if this will be answered later. So I guess we'll have to wait and find out if it was worth it. But for the time being, I thought it was pretty cool. Pretty cool ending to the episode.
Yeah, I think scenery, I think the scenery and the cinematography were very, very neat, very eerie
epic
and disturbing. Yeah.
Yeah. But, does the Night King have a character? Guess we'll find out, won't we?
Guess we'll find out.
Ask yourself, what is the Night King's motivation? Why is he turning all these babies' eyes blue? Why is Craster giving all his babies to the Night King? What does this character want, and why has he got this army of the dead? Who knows? But yeah, your sort of final thoughts on that stuff beyond the wall.
I really enjoyed a lot of it. I think some really good stuff that I'm really enjoying just constantly whenever we go to the wall is always stuff I'm really liking and how it's moving forward. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the eventual battle between the two, now one new faction at Craster's Keep against the men now leaving Castle Black.
Yeah, well, yeah, it'll be interesting because Bran's there. And John has beef with Carl Tanner and Rast for killing Mormont. And I guess just think about the implications. If Craster's wives and daughters die, what happens with the White Walkers when they stop receiving babies as gifts? That's a question to be asked from that. The other thing is that Locke is going along with them on this. So what is Locke's motivation in all of this?
Yeah, he's very clearly got some motivation.
And of course, John doesn't know it, but his direwolf is there, as is Bran's.
Which is now currently trapped under the snow.
Yes.
In a trap.
Yes. So there's quite a lot going on around that whole Craster's Keep storyline. Lots of characters involved in that. Lots of dynamics. So that's very interesting. Very interesting.
Lots going on.
Well, I guess we'll have to wait and find out and see what happens with that. I thought it was a really solid episode on the whole. I just think the marine stuff was a disappointment, and Tyrion not thinking, well, there's no way that father would kill you. Like that is something that should have been addressed. George R. R. Martin in A Storm of Swords got around it, and I'll explain why in another review when it's relevant. But yeah, oh well. But apart from that, I thought it was a really solid sort of dialogue-heavy episode, developing characters, transitioning storylines, sort of setting things up, and I also think I think something this show on a production level does really well is they capture a really different atmosphere for stuff beyond the wall. I think everything beyond the wall almost feels like a whole different thing to stuff that happens south of it. It has this different kind of, like, you know how they say winter is coming? Well, beyond the wall, that is what winter is, in a way. And they make you feel the winter, with the way that everything's shot and all that. I think that's something that's quite unique about the stuff beyond the wall. Is that not to say that it feels like a different show necessarily, but it definitely invokes a whole different vibe for certain. But yeah, so the consensus is pretty positive on the whole. Like, it's considered more subdued than its predecessors, but it is considered a rock-solid installment. And some people say it's a game changer because it diverges from the book series more than any other episode before. A few changes include Jon and Bran's storylines and how Daenerys conquered Meereen. and new information in regards to the White Walkers, how they multiply their army. Much of the episode feels like a spoiler for the readers of the series because of the changes, including the show's creators who know the ongoing book series, you know, how it goes forward, possibly having incorporated aspects that happen later in the books. They indicated that significantly diverging could be detrimental to the show. Could be. Could be. We'll see how that plays out. How diverging from the books plays out, and when that becomes a problem. I mean, we saw it happen in Karth, didn't we? We saw some of the diverging there, and how that, what that did to that storyline. We got a little preview in that. We saw how some of the diverging of Stannis's character motivations and what that did for him too. But we won't talk about that. They also commented that the scenes between Jaime and Cersei seemed to truly want us to think that what happened last week wasn't in any way rape, and wondered whether the show was going to acknowledge it at all. But of course, as we know, they didn't think it was going to be rape. So there's definitely, yeah, oh god, it's so awkward.
That's unfortunate.
But yes, there were thematic riches to be found, and namely the multiple searches for justice. That's true, actually. There were searches for justice throughout this episode. Through multiple storylines. Obviously with Daenerys and Meereen, with Jon searching out justice for Mormont, with it's justice for Tyrion, Cersei wanting justice for Joffrey.
Justice for Catelyn Stark, I guess, to
that's right.
Keep Sansa safe.
Yes, of course. That's right. And hence the name Oathkeeper kind of being fitting of that, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And the name of the sword being Oathkeeper. A much more honourable name than Widow's Wail. Which is what Joffrey called his sword.
That's such a lame name. Bit for Joffrey.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it was written by Brian Cogman, is known for his character-focused episodes. He did Kiss by Fire last season, which was, I think, a lot of people consider to be his masterpiece. Kiss by Fire was so good. That was the episode where the Hound fought Beric with the flaming sword. Jon and Eirich got together at the waterfall, and of course Jaime in the bathtub. That was such a good episode. But yeah, I thought Brian Cogman did a solid job. He's always really good with dialogue, Brian Cogman. It always comes across very natural to me. So yeah, well done there. I thought the direction from Michelle McLaren was really solid on the whole.
I agree. I think it was some really good, solid direction. I wouldn't say it was probably my favourites in terms of
not as much of a spectacle as
but yeah.
Not as much of a spectacle as some of the stuff in the previous two episodes that Alex Graves did, especially in episode 2. But in terms of having like sort of, I guess, closed-in character close-up scenes with lots of, exchanges between people, it did really well. I think the most extravagant visuals came in Meereen with the pyramid, and also with the very end with the White Walker stuff. That was also very extravagant visually.
Agreed. Yeah.
That stuff. There was some really good CGI effects in this for the matte paintings in the background and everything. It looked very stylish to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked and obviously because of the close-ups, the things like Olenna with the necklace and all that. That was some really good visual direction. The cuts between Jaime and Brienne as well were really well done with the facial expressions.
Yes, absolutely, really well done. Loved that.
Yeah, and I also really liked the way that they directed the scene with Marjorie and Tommen as well. The cutting between them was fantastic. One of the most tedious things to do in this episode as a director was the whole thing with Sir Pounce, like getting the cat to do what you wanted it to do was a nightmare.
Oh yeah, I imagine trying to deal with especially cats. Having a cat of my own just recently, they're very it can sometimes be especially can't control them a lot of the time. It's funny enough, actually, literally last night, my cat fucking came into my room and started making noises, waking me up, and then was on my bed trying to scratch my feet under the covers. So that was fun. That was fun.
Good cats.
4 in the morning, that was. 4 in the morning. Lovely.
That's great. Yeah, because I believe in the, they wanted the cat to be more of the scene, but it just wasn't possible. They had that one little bit.
Yeah. That one bit. Yeah, we just jumped in the bath and then jumped off.
Yeah. Oh, well. Of course, we have, again, the one thing that seemingly seems to be almost always great about Game of Thrones, and that is the music by Raymond Javadi. I thought he was fantastic, as always. Just
agreed. Music, as always, is bloody good.
This man can invoke the tone of any location he goes to and make them feel distinct and different. He did it with Marine. He did it with the White Walker stuff at the end. That was fucking great, the creepiness of that music. And he can also do really good character themes as well, and emotion between characters. This, when Jaime and Brienne said goodbye to each other and you had those strings playing in the background were so lovely. So yeah, shall we get on to some tracks by Raymond Javadi?
I guess we shall.
All right. Our first track is called Marine. Very nice.
Very nice. Very suited.
It always surprised me when we go to somewhere we've never been before, Raymond Javadi pulls out instruments and does things that he hasn't used yet, He gives everything a slightly different flavour. Yes.
Lovely track. Nice track.
Great track. Shame the storyline didn't live up to it. Oh well. Can't win everything.
No, I think I always really like the Daenerys storyline music, because it is quite different to the rest of the show in those tracks.
Yeah.
So these ones always feel a lot more distinct. But especially.
Yeah, with Essos, because it's a lot less developed in terms of its sort of technology, they use a lot more sort of tribal instrumentation, and there's a lot more Eastern inspired stuff. Hypnotic, I guess. It's not as traditional. A lot of the stuff in Westeros is very traditional, European style strings and trumpets and all that. Whereas a lot of the stuff in Essos is a lot of, bongos and sort of that sort of thing, wind and whatnot. And very fitting of the sounds of where they come from. Snake charmer music sometimes even too. The next track we have for this episode, fittingly given the title, is called Oathkeeper. There's quite a bit of music in there.
I like that one a lot.
Yes.
Two very good halves of that track.
He's very good at doing those extended, like, one string note that just that lingers on. Yes. And he's also very good with action drumming, tension, emotion, all of the above. He's a master at this stuff, he is.
Yeah, very much. Fucking very talented.
Very talented. I could be wrong, but I believe... Does Raymond Javadi do the soundtrack for Westworld as well? I think he does.
He does. Yeah, he did.
Yeah. He also did the soundtrack for Iron Man 1, funnily enough.
Yeah, he did.
Does he do the soundtrack for House of Dragon?
Yes, he does.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. How could he not? How could you have something Game of Thrones and not have him?
He also did the score for Eternals Uncharted. You
Wow.
know, all those. He did a Prison Break season 3 and 4. If I'm reading this right. So no, he's done a lot. He also did the one for Pacific Rim.
Yep. I can say with certainty, is the one thing that Dave and Dan doesn't ruin. Definitely, with certainty, I can say that. Because even in season 8 of Game of Thrones, his music was fucking amazing. So, we've always got that to look forward to, at least. We've always got that. One thing. Despite appearing in the title sequence, Winterfell and the Dreadfort do not appear in the episode itself, but their associated storylines via Bran and Locke's respective arcs do appear, however. So now we're getting into the stage where the title sequences don't just represent where we go to in the episode, it's also what's relevant, I guess. So I think at some point they just start just having every location from the whole season just be in the title sequence and they just keep them there. Because I think it's for convenience sake, and I also think because of it makes it less spoilery when you don't know where you're going. But there's still sometimes they do have some little neat surprises, like you see new things before you see what they are on screen, which is nice. So, big question to you. Are you confident on who you think killed Joffrey after this episode?
I have a good idea who's involved. I think they pretty much made it clear that there are at least some people, there's multiple people involved, or at the very least they're trying to cater us and curve us into thinking it's multiple people involved in this. So
one thing I can
say, yeah.
One bit of trivia I can give you that's very interesting about episode 2 of the season. You know that line that you noted at the wedding where the Queen of Thorns said, you know, talking about Robb Stark, it's like noting a mock horror of how hard the idea of killing a man at his wedding was. That line that you pointed out. In that exact same scene, you can see her hand fiddling with Sansa's necklace.
I was trying to think. Yeah, I think she definitely did. I definitely remember that happening.
Yeah. So, and now it's like you kind of had the full context of in episode 1 when you thought it was a nice little scene of Dontos being like, "This is my family heirloom. I'm giving it to you, repaying you for how you saved me from Joffrey." And now we know what it really was, and that it wasn't his. It was purchased recently and given to him by Littlefinger, and was used seemingly at the wedding by Olenna. If that's what you believe. If that's what you believe. Between seasons 3 and 4, Comedy Central's South Park aired a 3-part storyline parodying Game of Thrones, the Black Friday trilogy. All of the boys are fans, and as the Christmas shopping season starts up, they split into 2 rival factions over the next round of the console wars between PS4 and Xbox One at the time. Remember how long ago that was? 9 years now. Soon every boy in school was cosplaying as Game of Thrones characters, starting fighting each other and hatching various devious plots to win against the other side. To the point that some of them even visit George R. R. Martin at his home to ask how Game of Thrones would win their conflict. A running joke throughout Black Friday is satirizing how characters in Game of Thrones frequently discuss political intrigue while walking through the castle gardens in King's Landing. As Cartman keeps discussing political backstabbing while trespassing in a neighbor's extensive gardens. In the Season 4 Blu-ray commentary, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss revealed that they saw the South Park parody, and in response consciously stopped having the characters do this as frequently. So, in this episode, when Olenna Tyrell is getting ready to leave King's Landing while walking with Marjorie in the gardens, which she notes has become tedious, saying, "If I had to take one more leisurely stroll through these gardens, I'll fling myself from the cliffs." So that line from Olenna Tyrell is based on a South Park parody of Game of Thrones. So yeah, in the source material, the mutiny at Craster's Keep, their fate is briefly alluded to in the books. The writers discussed back in season 3 they wanted to eventually follow up on these characters. This is why they cast a bigger, more experienced actor such as Bern Gorman to play Carl Tanner, who personally killed Craster, because they wanted to return and expand on the characters in season 4. Because in the books, Craster and Mormon are killed by fairly minor characters, but season 4 builds up that Carl was a dangerous hired assassin and flea bottom.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a sort of a show edition, really. They've followed up on that attack and made it bigger than it is.
Yeah, well, so far I'm enjoying it.
The on-set camera directors got a bit carried away with showing the subjugation of Craster's wives by the mutineers when they actually toned down in the editing room from what they originally filmed. They filmed a long establishing shot of the full horror of what was going on at Craster's Keep before Carl starts monologuing. They decided that it was gratuitous even by their standards and didn't really serve the plot. Oh dear. Oh dear. Lots of rape.
Dear.
Lots of rape.
Oh dear.
This time on purpose. Wish they cut the other rape scene from the previous episode.
Yeah, that would be good.
That'd be good.
Yeah, make it a lot better.
As for the overall scenes of the mutineers brutalizing Craster's wives, professional porn actresses were hired for the shots, and the commentary says that the overall look that they were attempting was a nightmarish cross between Gustave Doré etching, a Bruegel painting, and a work by Hieronymus Bosch. So apparently the sequence showing the Night's Watch mutineers who have taken over Craster's Keep and brutalizing the remaining wives, Cogman said that sequence to this day was the hardest to write for the show. It was implied to happen off-screen in the books after Sam and Gilly fled, but it wasn't shown in the narrative, so he struggled with how much of this very dark sequence to actually show in the TV series. I can imagine it would be a bit, gritting your teeth writing a scene like that. But as to why they included the sequences, we've paid a lot of lip service to the idea that the Night's Watch is made up of shady characters, rapists and thieves. But we never saw much of that. The mutiny was the beginning. This is the worst of the worst finally free of the shackles of society. Logically, the mutineers who actually turned on Mormon were the absolute lowliest dregs of the Night's Watch, hardened criminals, rapists like Rass, or murderers like Carl, who rejected any societal limits, who lived to brutalize and take advantage of other people. The idea behind Morag, so she was the one that brought in the baby, was that she was the first of the daughters who became Craster's wife. So she's the prime wife, if you will, and the matriarchal figure of these women. She knows she can't fight these mutineers and knows that without them the White Walkers could destroy the wives. So there's a lot going on, and then you throw in Bran and Hodor, two of the most endearing characters. To have to write a scene where Hodor gets bear-baited and beat up was miserable, but the idea was put that Bran, Hodor, Jojen and Mera into a really dangerous situation beyond the wall. It didn't involve the supernatural, but rather humanity at its worst. So again, Bran's storyline in the books never goes to Craster's Keep, it actually goes around it. Yeah, them getting involved in this is also a show edition, which is interesting. But I think they've tied it together nicely with Summer and Ghost seeing each other again. I thought that was a really nice way to tie it together with the direwolves, which we definitely don't get enough of in this show.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, so apparently in the script he wrote Sir Pals as a kitten, but they hired a huge sumo wrestler cat, and he was a nightmare to work with. That's why it was so difficult, because it was a fully sized one. Apparently Natalie Dormer, who plays Marjorie, wanted to kill Cogman for how difficult the cat was to work with.
Oh my god.
Oh yes, of course, that detail of the boar's head that Joffrey shot in an arrow is still seen on the wall. Dave and Dan thought of that. They moved Tommen into Joffrey's bedroom and the remnants of this monstrous person are still there. Including his wife as well, clearly. A big part of the show is the impact of these characters. A lot of people die, but the impact is felt long after. Ned Stark's spirit looms large over the whole story, and it's absolutely the same with Joffrey's. That's a nice detail. Dave and Dan still putting in good work to the show at this stage.
Yeah.
Oh, I mentioned this. So he notes that Marjorie's scene with Tommen is a sequel of sorts to her prior scenes with Renly in What Is Dead May Never Die and Joffrey in Darkwing's Dark Words. That's exactly what I said. It's the scenes of her manipulating her partners, and she does it in similar ways. And in each scene, she's assessing her new betrothed, and particularly in the cases of Joffrey and Tommen, explores around in the conversation until she finds what points she can manipulate them on. So I like it how it's like she finds different ways to manipulate each different person. So like Joffrey didn't react to sexual advances but excited by violence, whereas Tom is simply too young and innocent to react to either of those things, but is fond of his cat. Because Tommen was quite intimidated by her sexual advances, wasn't he? It was Benioff and Weiss's idea that Daenerys would inspire the slaves in Meereen to rise up and free themselves, led by Grey Worm, instead of her freeing them directly. In the books, when Daenerys takes Meereen, she has Jorah and Barristan sneak in through the sewers to release the city's slaves so they can attack from within to distract the defenders while her main army stormed the gates from outside. Elements of this were moved for how Daenerys captured Yunkai in the TV series. The book version still essentially involved Jorah and Barristan sneaking in to release the slaves, but they felt it would make more dramatic sense for the slaves to be inspired by Daenerys' arrival in the season premiere, and then have Grey Worm be the one to sneak in and free them because he was himself a slave. This fits with the line Grey Worm has in the episode that no one can give their slaves their freedom, they must take it for themselves. I mean, I don't have a problem with Grey Worm being the one to lead it, I just have an issue with how they executed it. It's too small. There's not enough people to go around. I guess if before she'd got to the top of that pyramid, they had illustrated that they had gone around to all of these different places in Meereen and snuck through all these different sewers and done it again and again. Like, imagine if Grey Worm was giving a speech to those slaves, and then you had Jorah Mormont in a different sewer giving the same speech, and then you had Barristan Selmy in a different sewer giving the same speech, you know? Imagine if you had that and they were going around to all these different sewers, and then that led to that, and then eventually, once all the masters were captured, then you could do the thing of her rising to power at the pyramid. I think that would have made way more sense than what they actually did. The Grey Worm and Missandei scenes in this episode are actually the first in the entire series to include only non-white characters or the focus of people of colour. This includes the Dothraki and Dornishmen. Interesting. I mean, I guess Daenerys and Barristan crashed that party at the end of the scene, but you know, make Grey Worm and Missandei much more prominent characters in the show than they do in the books. I think it's probably because it's a bit like some of the other characters where, because you have these actors that are actually really good actors, they want to use them more. You know, they want them to have more screen time, and so they actually give them more to do. For the shot when Grey Worm and his Unsullied infiltrate Meereen by wading through a sewer line, the actors actually wore wetsuits underneath their costumes because the water was freezing. Oh my goodness. Oh, this is disgusting. Okay. The props master, Gordon Fitzgerald, explained that the prop of Geo Mormont's skull that Carl was using as a cup, instead of just using a generic prop skull, his team went an extra step and used pictures of the actor's jaw and teeth for reference, and then remodeled a prop skull to match them. So they went all the way with that skull.
That's great. That's pretty great.
Here we go. So now we have some trivia about the Kill the Masters thing. So the linguist David J. Peterson, who developed the Valyrian language in the TV show, pointed this out when he was shown the script. Asked if he had any questions, the message he sent to the writers was, "There's a scene where we see Kill the Masters graffitied on the wall. Fans of the books will be expecting to see this in Valyrian glyphs as opposed to the English characters, but thus far we haven't discussed creating a writing system for Valyrian. This is something I'm able and willing to do. I created the writing systems used throughout Defiance, and can do if D&D are interested. The producers apparently wanted the viewers to be able to read the graffiti." So stupid. You know what they literally could have done to fix this whole issue? Is they could have let the linguist create, the writing for the Valyrian language, have that graffitied on the wall, and then have subtitles tell you what it says. That's all you need to do. You just have subtitles tell the audience what it says. That would make way more sense.
I don't know why they do. I don't know why they just don't allow subtitles to, because that happens a lot in video games when you have subtitles on and you have a language on the wall that isn't English. When you can highlight it, sometimes it will show it in subtitles. So that's not uncommon.
Because the subtitles are meta. The subtitles are there for the audience, whereas what's on the actual wall is there for the characters in the story. It should be reading as Valyrian. So it should have low Valerian on the walls, and there should be subtitles telling the audience that it says "Kill the Masters." Having it say "Kill the Masters" in the common tongue is very dumb, because those slaves don't know the common tongue. They don't know how to speak our language. They don't know how to speak the language of the Westerosi. So why the fuck do they know how to write down? Not only know the words, but be able to write it down coherently. You know, we've seen the way that Davos can't write down English, even though he can. Well, not English, common tongue, even though he can speak it. So it's very weird. Very strange.
Very weird. Very strange.
Because, you know, we know that they have a glyph system for Valerian. We saw Tazer writing a letter in Valerian in Season 3. Funnily enough, that episode was The Baron and the Maiden Fair, and that was directed by the same person as this one. So in the books, it's suggested that Crassus' wives suspect that the babies that were given to the others, and they speculate that it's to make new others, but there's no clear definition of whether or not this actually happens. However, in this episode, it confirms to us in the show that what they're doing is they're giving babies to the Night King, and he's turning them into White Walkers. So that's made very explicit here. John quipping to Locke that he should have gone easier on the other recruit is a callback to Season 1, Episode 3, in which John briefly became unpopular with the other recruits because of his superior martial skills and aloof manner. So, we have the viewership for this episode. Last time on Breaker of Chains, we had 6.6 overnight and 8.2 overall. We now have the highest so far for Oathkeeper. 6.95 overnight and 8.4 overall. The highest viewing figures the show has gotten up to this point. We've almost cracked 7 million overnight viewers.
Quite getting close.
Getting close. So, your conclusion and rating out of 10 for Oathkeeper?
Episode that's a bit more on track than last episode. Overall, I think a lot of really good stuff, a lot of really good progression, some really good character interactions, and really good performances between actors that were very well appreciated. Other than the opening and some bits here and there in terms of issues, it's not mass. There's a lot of questions to be had on the complexity of morality in the Daenerys storyline that I don't think the show could be doing a lot more with that, especially given how well it's been doing the question of morality a lot in the past seasons. Other than that, I think this episode was pretty strong overall, so I would probably say give it about 8 out of 10, I would say, for Oathkeeper.
So yeah, for me, the highlights of this episode were the Jaime and Brienne stuff, and also all of the stuff at Castle Black with Jon Snow, and the stuff with Carl Tanner and Bran was fantastic. I had one small issue with the Tyrion Jaime scene that will becomes a bit of a weird issue with thinking of strategy, but it's not massively major, but it is a logical issue where it makes Tyrion not seem as smart as he should be at, sorting out issues. The Littlefinger Sansa stuff was great. The Olenna Marjorie stuff was great. The Marjorie Tommen stuff was excellent. So on the whole, it was mostly a really solid episode of Game of Thrones. But I do think the Daenerys Meereen storyline has undercooked world building, and it has very strangely underutilized morality complexity that is in a setting where there should be some very grand scale politics, and her being portrayed as out of her depth should be portrayed very, very strongly when it is kind of passed upon. So they are wasting a lot of potential there, but it's not as egregious as Dave and Dan and some of the other writers get sometimes, so I, like you, am also going to give this an 8 out of 10. Also, they introduced the Night King in this episode, and it's...
They did.
Interesting. We'll see where that goes in retrospect. Anyway, 8 out of 10. So that means the next time will be Season 4, Episode 5, the halfway point. We have the next episode, which is called First of His Name. What is your anticipation for First of His Name?
I'm in terms of going for. I think with the trial I'm imagining soon approaching. I think that's the only thing right now that I'm sort of waiting for to start. Everything else seems to be going slow, going to new directions. So that I'm thinking when that's going to be happening, whether that be next episode or even the one after. It had to be relatively soon, I'd imagine. Other than that, with John heading to out beyond the wall again with some volunteers, I'm excited to see where that goes. With a Cartana, I'm imagining there being a meeting at some point, especially with Bran being kept captive. With the Dany storyline, I'm expecting hopefully there's more to do with like her actions and what she's sort of doing, and there being a bit more conflict, because I feel like that is the show's strength. Is like we've talked about a lot in this reaction, the like idea of morality and how complicated it is. I feel like that's always been the show's strengths, and that feels to be lacking right now with her story, which is a bit disappointing. Yeah. Other than that, just excited to see where everything else goes.
There's
especially
also
with people like Littlefinger.
There's also a few storylines we haven't seen in a while, like Reek and Ramsay and Roose Bolton.
Yeah, we didn't see that this episode.
And
no,
we also didn't see Stannis Baratheon, his storyline in this episode either.
No, it did not. I think this season's strength is because it in previous seasons it did seem like every episode contained everything. I think this one, knowing there's a lot to deal with, it's allowing everything else to breathe and have its own time, and not try and cram it all into a single episode.
That's very true. Yes, season 4 is still balancing a lot of things. Doing some of it better than others.
For sure.
There was also no Oberyn Martell in this episode, or Tywin Lannister.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, so there's a few things lurking around that we have to think about upcoming. But yeah, should be very interesting. I think the most interesting thing going forward in the immediate future, thinking about it, is that Tommen is going to become the new king of the Seven Kingdoms, after Joffrey's death. And also, like you said, Jon Snow's men going up to Craster's Keep to deal with Karl Tanner's mutiny. Yeah. And of course, yeah, all the other stuff that's going on at the moment. I think one thing that they've done well with this season is that I think they've built up almost a sense of dread overall. Like there seems to be this something, like it's almost like there's something going on, but you're just sort of waiting for it to hit you in the face, if you get what I'm saying. Like this thing, you can, I feel like as an audience member, you can feel there's things around the corner and you just haven't gotten to them yet. That's how I feel. At least that's how I felt the first time I watched season 4, is I was like, I know there's something happening and I can't. And I think that feeling comes from the fact that we just witnessed a whole season of that with season 3 with the Red Wedding. How they literally just did that to us, where they had a whole season of there's things that you don't know that are happening, but you can feel that they're happening, and then they happen to you. And then, of course, with season 4, they're doing the same thing, and you can just sort of sense this, like, you just know something's coming, but you can't quite put your finger on what that is yet. And it's all building up to climactic events as they sort of reach the end of adapting a Storm of Swords in some of the storylines. So it should be very interesting once we hit the halfway point of the season in the next episode, how that all goes.
Indeed.
Because of course we know, Ramsay wants to capture Moat Cailin for his dad, and Davos Seaworth has got that writing that letter to the Iron Bank. That's all going on. So yeah, it's quite a lot to look forward to in many regards. So yeah, any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
All right. We'll see you all next time. Well, tomorrow will be day 12, which will be an Edar live stream. And then after that on day 13, we will see you all for season 4, episode 5, First of His Name. Bye-bye.